you are now on video.
Well, welcome to Level Up Your Layout, component-based site building with Layout Builder and View modes.
My name is Aimee Hannaford, name change, and I'm the CEO and principal architect at Hook 42.
Yeah, and I'm Ryan Bateman. I'm an architect at Hook 42.
And today we're going to talk about a few topics. We're going to talk about that moment of design to development, view modes, layout builder, view modes and layout builder basics. We're going to demo, and we're going to look at some basic things. We're going to talk about a little bit going beyond that and talk about some considerations. And I'd like to say, if you have questions, ask, but if we're going to talk about a lot of things, so we might go very fast. So Doug, just take a moment and figure out which question you want to ask. And it's going to be which question? And good morning, everybody. Okay, so first of all, like, who gets PSDs or a mock-up or sketch file from their designer? And you have it in, like, JPEGs or whatever you have. And you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? How am I going to build this? And as you enter into an idea of reusable components or chunks of things, you have to go and address your design with some strategy. So we like to use a lot of component-based design or atomic design principles. But when you take the site design, you wanted to make sure that you identify similarities across the site. So it's a hero. I'm going to use words now you probably have all heard before, but sections of the site that look like they're reused lots of different places. And this is the first point where you can really work with your designer to understand what was their intended function about these components. You want to define the main structure of your layouts, not just the global layout, but the layout of the content sections that you're in. And you can see here some of the basics. One column is like content, woo! But then that's not sufficient beyond, the About Us page, about the privacy policy page. But then we get to a lot of different types of structures and stacks and that type of thing. So you want to define that major structure.
Right, and we have some simple examples here, but obviously there's the ability to mix and match multiple types of columns on top of one another, and so analyzing that and finding those things is really important.
Yeah, and you don't want to start too huge. Just start basic, and then when you find that you need one later, as you go through your strategy, start adding them in. So start with the basics and then start working up. You want to define the components. So this is these themes of design that's used across the site. So you can see at the top there's an article that has the title and the picture and a link. Also a recipe. These are all taken from the Unami profile that you can download from Drupal and look at and install it yourself and touch it. So this is all very relevant. So we have a hero area and a banner. So we can see that there's consistencies, but there's variance between them. So you want to identify, I have this kind of card thing up here, but every one of these is a different variant, and they apply it to different content.
Right, and it's obviously going to depend on what sort of design you get, whether or not whether or not your designers are kind of looking at things more from a component strategy. Ideally, you're getting somebody who's doing the design who's thinking, okay, this is a different view of the same content, and in this context, it's going to look like this. So your mileage may vary, I guess, based on
and
how much they're thinking about that in the design process.
Yeah, and if you get a designer that's done all print, and they're like, I made this, and every page is completely different, you're like, whoa.
Right.
Let's have a talk, and that's fun, and that's a very common thing if you guys get designs from an in-house design team and you're actually being the implementer, and so there's let's talk. This is a good exercise to review the designs together.
Yeah,
and then you document them, and then you also want to name your layouts and components, and understand non-technical people need to consume the names in the life cycle of your site. So I'm going to keep it stupid simple, or people call it keep it simply stupid. But use the KISS principle. Simplicity is clear and obvious and descriptive. Plan for reuse everywhere. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, a really common thing you see a lot is people naming things after like the content that it is, not the implementation, right? So like you call it like, oh, it's my
news layout,
right? And it's like, well, it's going to be applied to a lot of content types, right? So why are we calling it news, right?
Exactly.
And there's only one content type called news.
Yeah. So you can see here for the layout, my name is 2-column 7525. So that would be fun at a party. And then you map components to content itself. So here, a single item of content, like a recipe, can be displayed in multiple ways, and you want to identify and document each time the content item can be displayed. So, for example, you have the full content of the recipe itself, but then you have maybe like a little tiny sidebar layout of it, or a larger home page type of like a leading card. So it's interesting. So you take the time to do it and write it down with words. But naming is hard to avoid too much specificity and leverage existing best practices of the words being used. Don't reinvent the wheel, because somebody else coming in to help you, or you handing it off to the client, they'll be like, but I didn't see that word. What does that mean? Yeah. So it's all about reusability and education. Like you don't want to take a lot of overhead to be confused. So view modes, does anybody know what a view mode is? Oh, that's good, because the last time I've done this about a while, but the view modes is like 2017, like I didn't get a lot of arms up. So it's actually amazingly good that people are using view modes more. And so it's it's all the stuff on the Manage Display tab, but there's more until you enable Layout Builder. But historically, it's all the stuff on the Manage Display tab. But really, a view mode is a view display, is the rendered output of an entity, like a node, following the configuration rules defined in a view mode. So if we think about our buckets of how the page is built, the view display is your UI plus your content, right? It's the recipe content plus how you're displaying it. That config is the view mode. How am I collecting that information and communicating it up and out? And view modes have existed since Drupal 6 and CCK. Drupal 7 had them, but it was hard to see unless you installed Display Suite. Now Drupal 8 is in core. It has a nice UI. You can get at them. You don't have to always program them. Now, all entities have view modes, so you can use them everywhere, and Contrib adds more entity support for doing more cool things, in quotes. And they're really useful, so you can configure layouts with no code. No code is in quotes. But it allows for folks that have a lot just of site builder, like business analysts making a site, smaller places, to get through and make layouts. And you can provide multiple layouts for the same content, like your teasers or your cards. And you can it adds a layer of tools for content display. So if you're trying to use Quick Edit and it's not there, like in Drupal 8, that's because you have to enable view modes to get that functionality. So you can't just, unless they fix it's not running in default, it's a big deal. And then it helps do the layout configuration, and it helps provide field formatters and everything. So they're super useful. And they live in the structure, display modes, view modes. There's also something called form modes, which help do the same thing for your form. And the prerequisites when you come in and make a view mode, you should know what its name is. And if it's a view mode that's going to be on a content type or a block, or a custom entity or a taxonomy term.
Or media, because now we have media view modes, right?
Which is awesome. Which is awesome.
Super great.
Yeah, I can now, and I totally used to hack and make my own media view modes because it wasn't there, so I'm super excited that it's there. And why don't they show up when I'm trying to, I made a view mode, but if it doesn't show up on your content type, you actually have to go in and check that you want that view mode to be on there. And that's good, because then you decrease confusion if you have every view mode you've ever created available.
Right, they all would show up, and becomes like a million-mile long list.
And you're like, what? I can't see anything. And so you can have a very targeted application for your view modes, and it helps sanity. Sanity's good. And if you look at applied view modes, if you look at the Aimee Drupal 8 install, at the article, or you can look at the recipe, there's a very specific view called the article aside, which is like a little sidebar roll-up of articles. You can say, oh, I'm going to go into the article content type. There is a card layout, or a card view mode, and oh, I have a list of these things. So who used to use fields like in views to format their views? Oh, okay, yeah, there's people, it's like an older method, but it still comes out sometimes. But the beautiful thing about view modes is that you can make a view and just render your output as content, like the rendered entity, and choose your view mode. So you can see that I go here, and then it clicks to view mode, and you can see all of the different types that are available to this.
Right, and the nice thing is then if you've styled that view mode, then yeah, that rendered output is going to be exactly like you expect the card view of that type of content to be. And yeah, then you can have it go into a list or a grid or however you want that to appear.
Yeah, it's just like bling, pretty, and it's like the reuse and its consistency, and it's amazing. And so if we wanted to actually render it itself, you can render. This is when you're in Manage Display. You can render reference content as a rendered entity. We'll get into that in a little bit later. So, naming your view modes, it's hard, but maintain standards. We talked a little bit about like, why do you have an article teaser? Like, why is it special for article?
Right.
Name them in a broad to narrow fashion. So avoid specificity until you need them, and then reduce the unnecessary view modes, like keep the number a bit low. So words. So some of the words that you hear is the word full content, and that is like understood as like the URL for the page. So it's like the most content. So that was it is a very broad way to define it, but it's in general, that's what people think full content is. Teasers display content in a listing format, like if it's in a row. Cards display content in a grid format, like a blocks. Wow, I just used an overloaded term. I'm sorry. I apologize. Banners are banded layouts. Maybe for call to actions in the middle of a page. And then I like to use something called an admin view mode. And an admin view mode, who makes tools in their back end for the content editors to use? Yeah, there's your admin view mode. Booyah.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you. I know, seriously, it was so simple. I was so frustrated, like doing like admin pages. I'm like, I need an admin view mode. And I'm like, duh, I need an admin view mode. I am not going to take a long time on this, but the naming convention could be like content specificity, entity specificity, view mode family, view mode variant, and then display context. This is crazy. You're like, where did you get that math? Because I use taxonomic rank to understand my view modes. So if we think of like, oh, I'm a human and I'm part of Animalia or whatever it is, in the Drupal taxonomic rank, we are talking about display modes, where in the kingdom, view modes and form modes exist. The phylum is like your content bundle, so your content type, block, term, comment. Then the class is going to be like, oh, this is what it actually is, the teaser, the card. But then sometimes you want to have one or two types of cards. And like Aimee has card, common, alt. And card. And I don't know what comment means. I don't know what common alt means. And what if I have a common alt 2, 3, 4? They didn't start with the 1. Yeah. So I'm not being critical of that. It's something when you name your strategic layout, take into consideration.
Yeah, and it's really worthwhile to spend a lot of time doing this, because one of the things that it's easy to forget about is that at the end of the day, we're trying to make an incredibly usable CMS experience for the content editors who are eventually going to leverage this site. And if and sure, they might be able to finally understand after they've implemented something that's poorly named exactly what it does. But what you really strive for is for somebody to be able to read one of these view mode names and say, I know what that is. I know and it can expect what's going to get rendered out on the other end.
Yeah, and then if you get into family, you'll have something called product short teaser, and you're like, wait, why did you just tell me like a specificity? I shouldn't be doing that. This just becomes the conversational name, like when you're talking about things. Oh yeah, it's the short teaser of product. Maybe in Tide it was short teaser view mode applied to product content type.
Right.
That's how it's implemented, but in conversation in a project, it becomes product short teaser. Mm-hmm. So this is where you understand there's words being spoken with people, and then there's implementation on Drupal, and there's a little bit of a separation there.
Right.
And then sometimes this is the most expansive example I've had. It was like, if you need to be, if you are working with German and for some reason your view mode needed to be different for a specific language, this is so rare. But this was just to build out the end of the use cases, right? It could be another conversational name for project management tickets. It's like, please do a video short teaser view mode for Spanish or German. And wow, that maybe would just be a view mode called teaser German and applied to a specific thing, of a specific product. Or at least for video, it may be in media. So, yeah. So anyway, again, avoid too much specificity.
You want the right amount. You want to be in the perfect range.
Yeah. Reusability and patterns, best practices, and focus on user success. And the happier your users are, the more successful they are, the less they'll be distracting you from doing the work that you're supposed to be doing, which is probably theming their site. Sorry.
That's great.
We all feel it. So
cool. So now we're going to talk a little bit about Layout Builder. Right. So the general structure of this is we're talking view modes, we'll talk Layout Builder, and then we'll talk about them together. So what is Layout Builder? How many people in here have actually used Layout Builder before? Okay, good number of people. So it is a cool new thing in Drupal 8. It's a display management interface for Drupal 8. It's disabled by default, but it can be enabled. And what the easiest way to think of it is it replaces your managed display page with a new thing that's called Layout Builder. And it's a drag and drop interface for building layouts on page. It looks kind of like this. You can go in and add layout sections, and I think this GIF cuts off, but we'll see it like add a section, and then you get these buttons where you can add blocks, and then those blocks can be dragged around on the page. This should look very familiar if you've ever used Layout Builder or used any of its forerunners like Page Manager or Page Builder or Panels, Panelizer, that kind of thing. Or
like Panels IP, if you guys remember that one.
Mm-hmm.
That's fun.
So let's talk like a brief history of Layout Builder. How did we kind of get where we are? In D7 and earlier, we had things like Panels, Page Builder, Panelizer, much of which their kind of architecture sort of inspired what became Layout Builder. And then in 8.3, we got the Layout API in Drupal core. That allowed us to do layout discovery. We could define layouts in our theme, and then those layouts were, they were useful in many ways prior to the introduction of Layout Builder. But once Layout Builder was actually available, they became super useful because the layouts that you define in Layout Discovery can actually be leveraged as Layout Builder sections. So at 8.5, we finally got Layout Builder in core, and that's kind of how we got to today. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about like what makes a layout. So are people leveraging like the Layout Discovery system in their themes? If people are Drupal themers, yeah, cool. They're really actually pretty simple. You kind of just have to have three things to make a layout. You need to have a twig template that tells your content how to display, and you need to have a YAML definition that says, hey, this is what my layout is called, and then some CSS and JS. That I assume is optional. You could just not have styling for your layout if you wanted. But that would kind of make for a crummy layout, if you ask me. So let's talk a little bit about like where does Layout Builder live in Drupal 8. It's here in the Manage Display tab. And so once you've enabled it, you can actually just click this Manage Layout button. When you click that, it's going to bring you to that drag and drop interface that we kind of saw the GIF of earlier. And there are two places to do this. So the one is that we can set layout defaults, and those are done just like Manage Display was for content types. So you go and you say, this is what all of my content is going to look like. And what you're doing when you click this Manage Layout button is that you're saying, by default, all of the content of this type is going to use this layout. And then we have this little button that's hard to read here, but if you check this and it says allow each content item to have its layout customized, there's optionally a second place where you can do any work with Layout Builder, and that is on each specific node. They're going to have a layout tab that's added to the view, edit, and delete controls. And when you click that, you're brought to the Layout Builder interface, and you're able to create a custom one-off layout. And it's gonna fork from the default layout. So what you'll get when you click the Layout tab is the current state of the default. Once you start making modifications to it, you're forked from the default, and you're kind of on your own. You don't get changes that happen to the default version anymore. But you can go in and add any custom blocks that you might want. You can add any fields into the layout of that page that maybe weren't included in the default. And all that.
And what's interesting around this is that you can actually configure parts of the page to be fixed, and then some parts to have overrides for custom. So if you have an article page and you always want this, left sidebar to have like the taxonomic navigation structure, then you can fix that, and then they allow some flexibility within the article body itself. Yeah, so I talked to Chris about that.
No, totally. Cool. And so let's talk a little bit about just kind of the basics of combining these two concepts. So I know that was sort of a fast introduction into Layout Builder, but I think it'll make a little bit more sense when we start to talk about it in the context of using it with view modes. So how can we leverage the huge power that we get from view modes to leverage that existing content in Layout Builder, right? We want to make it composable, reusable, that whole thing. And the big way that we can do this is that we can map view modes to custom block types. Do people in here use custom block types very much in Drupal 8?
Okay, so let's explain what that is.
Yeah. So custom block types are a new entity type in Drupal 8 that didn't exist before, and it's kind of like
it's a block content type.
It's you can create content types for blocks. And so if you like being able to go through and create content types for all this granular level stuff on your site, but you've thought, shoot, it's a real bummer that I can't just kind of spin up a little block that has fieldable, that I can field in the UI, now you can do that, and you can use custom block types to do this. You can also use custom block types almost anywhere that you would use something like paragraphs. The implementation is very different. People like to argue about this a little bit,
yeah,
so I'm hesitant to bring it up.
We're going to walk right through and say the cool thing is you can do an entity reference to one of those nice articles or recipes on the site.
Yeah, so if you have a custom block type with an entity reference field on it, you can actually then reference some content somewhere on your site using a given view mode. So that's kind of the method that we're going to describe and talk about here, and it's sort of diagrammed here. So say that we have a content type in Umami of the type recipe. This is something that's provided by default. That content type of recipe has a view mode on it called card. And so we can place things across the UI with the view mode of card. But if we want to be able to use it in Layout Builder, we can go ahead and create a custom block type that's mapped actually to our view mode. And then we're able to have an entity reference field, which is shown here in this gray box. That's just to a content reference, which then we fill out with whatever piece of content we want. And we set the display settings to say, render me this as a card. And so now we have something that's placeable, a type of block that is placeable in Layout Builder that lets us render content as type of card.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really powerful, and it's all exciting. So if you actually use the same view mode called card on a lot of different types of content, and you expose in your reference field all the different types of content that actually can leverage that card. You just need the one like reference content block that will be like, oh, cool, I've got articles and recipes and stories or whatever. I got all sorts of things there because I know all of them use the view mode card. So instead of having to make a block for each content type, you're like, dude, I just got my reference content block, and you can use it all sorts of places.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you've kind of kept a tidy view mode structure up to this point. Yeah, and you're truly reusing those view modes a lot. It pays off a lot once you get to a point like this, where then because there's an alternative reality of this where maybe you would end up having 15 different custom block types where you're like, okay, I'm doing a content reference to this particular content type of the view mode like recipe card, and I'm only going to use it to allow me to place recipe cards. But instead, if you're truly reusing that, you can have it be one custom block type that sort of leverages a lot of different things. And we're going to show you guys what that looks like. So we have an Umami setup here in the back. So this is on Simply Test Me. I'll log in. You know what they say about live demos? They always go super smoothly, right? Isn't that what they say? Cool. So yeah. We're in just like, this is a brand new vanilla Umami install. I just spun it up like an hour ago. And let's take a look at structure and let's look at content types. And so we have bump up the size? Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, is that good? Or is that like way too big now? Okay, cool. So we have 3 different content types in Umami. We have a recipe, we have a basic page, and we have an article. And I want to look at recipe, and I'm going to take a peek at sort of what their view mode structure is like. So I'm going to go to the Manage Display tab. I'm going to see, okay, so they have, like we were demoing earlier, we were showing they have a card common, and a card alt, and a full content view mode. And we can see that the card has like a difficulty in the image on it, and the card common has just the image, so it's significantly smaller and is doing some formatting. So let's go ahead and add a custom block type that maps to our view mode. So if we want to create custom block types in Drupal, we can go to Structure, Block Layout, Custom Block Library, Block Types. If you have the drop-down menus from admin toolbars, it makes it much easier to do that. And so we only have a couple of simple block types here. But we can go ahead and add a new custom block type. And we're just going to call it card. And we'll say cards for placement and layout builder. And when we manage the fields on our card type, we actually don't need the body, so we're going to go ahead and delete
it. Suspense.
And then we can add a new field, and we'll create a reference to some content. We're going to say, we'll just call it referenced content, because we can reuse this field in a few different places. And we're just going to say it can only allow one value. And it's required. And we're going to say it's type recipe. Our articles also have it, so we can go ahead and do that too if we really wanted to. For this demo, I'm just going to only tie it to recipe.
Because that's what we tested yesterday.
That's what we tested. Yeah, and
so that's what you do in live demos. That's what you test.
Exactly. Yeah, and then so a really critical thing here is that once you've set up this entity reference field, you want to go and make sure that you disable this label, and then you also want to come here and pick rendered entity. And when you set up this rendered entity format, you're going to be able to pick the view mode here. So we can see by default it's coming to the default view mode, but we actually want to be able to render this as a card, right? Because this is our card custom block type. And so we're going to go ahead and set that up as card. We can save it. Cool thing about Layout Builder is that we could theoretically use Layout Builder to do our layout for the custom block type, but we're not doing that right now. Cool. And then so Umami doesn't have the layout builder enabled by default in various content types across the site. So if we come to any one of these articles, let's go ahead and view one of these. We'll see that we don't have a layout tab here. So we need to actually enable layout builder on this page. And so I'm going to go to structure and to content types and to the article content type, because that's the one that I'm messing around with. And I'm going to say for full content, use layout builder. And I'm going to allow each content item to have its layout customized. So I'm going to save that.
Somebody had a question?
Yeah, question?
Sorry if I missed it, but when you were referencing the content, can you only reference content types, or can you reference other pieces of content?
Oh yeah, if I had picked a different reference, then a different reference field, I could have done that. Yes.
You can only have like one reference field per like content reference. So
yeah. So when I'll go back and show that again real fast, because that's a really great question. So custom block library, block types, and card manage fields. So when I create this entity reference, I can't get it to do it unless it shows me. Yeah. Okay, so I'll start adding a field just to demonstrate this, and this would be another content. And so we can do a reference, and we can have it be to like media. We could have it be to a file. We pick what it is here. So if we pick content here, then the only thing that we can pick is content. And I think if we do other, we can pick custom block types even.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of how we got to there. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Can you conceive of putting one of those fields on just like one particular block?
Mm-hmm.
So like every single one of those, so that you can just use the one block.
Oh, the one block to rule them all?
Yes.
The answer is that we'll get it to there later. There's usability considerations that you have to consider. Non-technical content users that will need to interface with things. So where is the sweet spot for the highest adoption and understanding of your user base is drives you to the one block to rule them all.
Right. So in that model, you'd have 4 fields on it, right? If I'm understanding what you're describing correctly. So you'd have to pick which one you want to render or which one you want to fill out. Yeah. And then you have to run into that problem of
if that, then that.
What does somebody? What happens if they fill in 2 of them accidentally? Right? What do we do then? Right?
Oh, I know. Yeah. So that's why there's simple choices you can make, and this is where that balance is. Like, okay, I'll have 4 different block types, but they're very specific. I'm a taxonomy term or a user or whatever. But then the user could see in Layout Builder, I'm going to use one that's called content.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use one that's called, or like authors or something. So anyway.
Yeah. And so now that I've enabled Layout Builder on full content for the content type of article, I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to refresh the page. And now we have the layout tab. So this is going to be doing a one-off specific layout, right? We talked about that earlier, where the default's defined on the Manage Display page, and then the override is done on the node itself. And when we come down here, we can see, okay, now we have the ability to add sections, and we have the ability to move blocks around and all of that. And
sections are like logical layout sections.
Yeah, and your layouts that are defined in your layouts YAML file and twig in your theme can become sections if you write them correctly. And
see, here's our favorite, 2-column, 3-column.
Our good old friends, 1-column, 2-column, 3-column, and 4-column.
Yeah. I've seen you before.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the other slide.
Yeah. So this is going to be like our bad camp section. I'm just going to give this an administrative label. And once I've created a new section, I have the ability to add a block. And in case people haven't used Layout Builder before, we can go through and show that there's just there's a bunch of fields that we're able to pick from here, things that are like system level blocks, a bunch of things. What we're really concerned about is this button at the top, which is Create Custom Block. We're going to go ahead and click that, and then we're brought to a UI that lets us pick any of our custom block types that we created. And so we have this card block type. We can go ahead and click that, and I'm going to give it a title. I'm going to say it's Bad Camp Demo Block, because I'm not feeling very creative this morning. and then we have this reference content. And this field automatically shows up as an entity autocomplete. You can use other form widgets that make this a little bit easier on people to be able to pick, maybe using like a view, or the contrib module inline entity form would definitely let people pick existing entities a little bit easier. So there are some contrib space things that you can do to make this a little less frustrating, but
the layout builder, there's the considerations you don't have as much real estate like you would on a form.
Yeah.
So that you just have to understand when you're doing your layout builder approach too, that you take that into consideration. So
yeah.
There's work being done to improve that. But
I'll be the first to admit that I'm really embarrassed that it took me a long time to figure out that this drawer is actually movable, and that you can drag it, because you can only make it bigger up from here. There's like the tooltip changes only right there, and I kind of thought, it would be the whole sidebar. Anyway, interesting side note. But so in this case, we kind of have to know what content we're looking for. I'm just gonna type a letter and
there's
say
a brownie or something.
Okay, here we go, and that's the UI is a little dark there, but so we're gonna pick this super easy vegetarian pasta bake. We're gonna say, okay, cool. I want to bring that in. And there we are. We have, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can see it. We have our view mode of card, which was set up, that we're ideally reusing everywhere across the site. Placeable in Layout Builder, super easy, and we can place as many of these as we want. So like, say we want to have a curated selection of different recipes that goes at the bottom of this particular article, because we know we want these ones to show up because they're like common cross-sells from this one or something like that. Yeah. We could add a layout builder section of 4 columns, so bad camp 4 column.
Yeah. And what's really nice about this, who has like marketing teams that are like, we need a certain brand consistency, but then we want to have like full creativity. You're like, okay, get right on that. When you have like these consistent layouts defined across the different content, then you have a nice like predictable, balanced design. So you can say, do a recipe from this one, and do like an article and talk about an author or a chef, and they could all look the same. So it's a very balanced section without like being like, whoa, why is this like all lopsided and stuff? So go ahead.
Yeah, and so it just makes it really easy for us to come in here and make sort of our own curated views. Content editors really like this because they like to see that you give them views that render things out in nice ways that leverage your view modes, but then they can also take advantage of the same view modes here in the content editorial experience when they're doing custom content, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So we'll add some watercress soup here. I'm just going to add 4 of these here so that we can then also just
have a balanced page.
Yeah, make everything look nice, settle down our...
Go ahead.
Question. I don't feel like I don't see the block configuration on this.
You don't.
Does that...
Yeah.
That was the silent smile for the video.
You should probably point out these are not real blocks at this point.
So you keep doing that. So the layout builder blocks are different than... They are built on the same core block system, but they have less overhead. There's different management of those blocks, and that helps with performance, and they're kind of hidden blocks. So you can get in it and be like, I'm exposed that. I can find those. But basically, they don't have a lot of the controls because it's assuming Layout Builder is managing its controls. Right. So the answer is, you can get in there through the back door, but that's not advised.
Yeah, so. And it's a really good point. So we should just demonstrate. So one thing that people will know about custom block types, if they had leveraged them much before Layout Builder, is that if you created a bunch of custom block types, you would come to this page, the custom block library and blocks, and you would see a zillion blocks. Every single block that you'd ever created was all listed here, and it's like, I kind of don't need that, right? The only place that I need to be able to edit that block is in the instance where I placed it, right? So this is one of the big things that changed when Layout Builder was introduced, is that now we have these blocks that exist that are not listed here, and they're managed a little bit differently.
These are it's reusable blocks.
Yes, these are blocks.
Reusable equals yes. Layout, yes, there's questions. Of course you can reuse layout builder things, but that's different. Yeah, go ahead.
So one thing I've assumed to be true is when you create an inline block, those are called global inline blocks, when you do it inside the layout builder.
Yep.
When you do that, you cannot reuse that anywhere else.
Right.
And
correct.
That might change, but it's still true today, if I understand.
Correct, and that's like insert contrib and meld it into, like, what was that?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, so for the recording,
So,
yeah.
So, go ahead.
Oh, the question was, so for right now, layout builder blocks are a global, non-reusable blocks,
yeah, so they're global, non-reusable blocks. People are talking about, hey, can I please use those in the future? And the answer is yes, they're talking about it. Will it be contrib first and then go into core? That's just the life cycle of everything that is in Drupal right now. So they're going to, at what point does that happen? There are creative ways if you want to do this, though. If you wanted to truly create a reusable block that has layout builder, you can make a custom block type, use layout builder for that, and that becomes a reusable block type. So it's how do you approach your site building strategy?
Yeah, and if we created a custom block here, those are still placeable via layout builder as well. So, yeah, what's up?
This might be a dumb question.
We
My
time.
apologies for this. Am I missing a piece about contextual? I would like to place a block in all of this content type.
Oh.
German.
Yes. Yeah. So that was
Patterning.
Yeah, we need to we have 5 minutes to finish the rest of the session. So we're going to just move now back to the slides.
Yes, we will move back to the slides, but we will answer that question.
Sorry, the
at
boss
the end.
got. I'm the project manager. I'm like, we are behind schedule, but the quality is really high, and I love the engagement. But
yes.
okay,
yeah, we do have to get onto it.
That's okay. So it's all these things that we talked about. It's like understanding your applied scope. Consistent location of customizations. We talked some of these considerations because Layout Builder is flexible. You have a lot of places to make changes and overrides and defaults. Make sure that you have a consistent approach to do it and how you train your dev teams and your content editors. Make sure that you have permissions set up correctly. And then there are additional contrib modules that you can not have that huge list of blocks and fields available to the content editors that you can, like, based on a role, limit the amount of things that they see. So it really enhances the end user experience by not causing confusion. And so leveled up layouts, we can go quickly. So the layout builder versus paragraphs.
Fight.
Oh, you can. So you can use them together. There's a contrib module for that. But, custom blocks we talked a lot about for content is essentially kind of what paragraphs are anyway. So in the back end, they're managed a little bit different, like we touched about that already. It questionably is less performance impact if you're using the native block system than paragraphs. And then the big thing that is with paragraphs, like the in-context UI that Layout Builder provides, is different. Like paragraphs is all the form-based kind of layout. So,
which can be hard to do in the sidebar. Frankly.
Yeah. That's why I'm like, who would want to put the paragraph there? But if you had like maybe a couple of like selections or something, that might be interesting.
There's also a contrib module that allows you to take the editorial experience of creating a custom block and put it in Drupal's modal UI instead of in the side drawer, which is a nice way to, if you're using that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. And you can still leverage Twig templates and CSS just like you had done in your paragraphs and that type of thing. So things that you used in paragraphs could be applied to Layout Builder. Layout Builder and Multilingual. The pillars of Drupal core is multilingual, so that's great. It applies to Layout Builder. There are contrib extensions to help multilingual and translations provide things like true translation, which is just the copy and layout stay the same, or the language changes but the layout doesn't change, or a true localization where the layout might change for Japan versus the one that's in the US.
Right, and these are both covered right now. That functionality isn't in core, but there are two contrib modules that cover the two approaches to doing translation in Layout Builder. One of them's symmetric translation, and the other is asymmetric translation. That's either, they kind of map closer to like translation versus localization.
Translation is symmetric, and localization is equals asymmetric. And everybody that you probably ever work on says, oh, of course the display is going to stay the same all the time through all languages. And then the first thing they do is go, no, Japan has to change. So you want to have mindful multilingual configuration with Layout Builder. And then in general, we want to be aware of blockception. It's the same thing like paragraphception, like how many nests are there, because the complexity of multilingual display overrides permissions, it just increases the more you nest. Yeah, and it can get sort of scary for the content editor too if you're nesting blocks within blocks within blocks using entity references over and over again. They're like, how do I get to that path? Like they can't even see it because everything is hidden from another.
And leveraging view modes the way that we're describing is a good way to avoid having that happen, because instead of creating a custom block that just has a bunch of fields that make it look like a card that points to that piece of content, you just use that content itself in its view mode, right? And you don't have to do any fielding.
So it's really cool. Document your implementation in all the places, right? There's user documentation, there's the inline documentation, or in field, in Drupal. Just make sure that you can surface your glossary and the words that you're using in your project to convey the meaning. So everybody speaks the same language and people will adopt it with more happiness. But the big thing is Layout Builder is moving fast. It's got a lot of support. It is constantly moving. At what point do you just jump in and try it and take the leap?
Yeah.
We did.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's also, ooh, cool, let's see that cool stuff. So as you are on your client projects or in your own projects, figure out like what you actually need to do, and is it in the core Layout Builder or is it contrib, and how kind of long has it been around, because then it'll like see if it's vetted for prime time for you. But using it will help improve it.
Totally.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Yeah.
Create your strategy before you site build, please. And read the... Please. Please. Do it, really. Read the current docs and watch the current videos. Emphasis on current. Check the dates of what you're looking at, because the evolution of Layout Builder and its support is just like...
Yeah, things are changing really fast, so it's easy to find information out there that might not necessarily be accurate. So if you go to the Drupal org initiative pages and stuff, you're likely to find more current information, and I think that's really the place to go for info about this stuff. Yeah, and you really, really, really want to contribute to the issue queues around this, because testing and QA will only improve it faster for stability for over time. And Layout Builder is the history to is the future going into Drupal 9. So if you're transitioning into sites that need to span the test of time and have such a nice interface for your marketers, this is the path. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Just want to mention at the front end summit they said that there's a contrib module called blacklist.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
Take away those system blocks.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So
there's blacklist, and then there's
Layout Builder restrictions. Allows you to stop people from placing certain layouts or limit the kinds of layouts they can use, and the blocks that they can place as well.
Yes.
It's an overlap.
Yeah. So for example, if the articles you only want to have like 2 variants or something, you can really tune your configuration to only allow certain overrides. Yes, the thumb is up.
Yeah, and cleaning up the UI, that's, I think, probably the biggest thing for editorial experience with Layout Builder is, like, the default that we get, like, in Umami is very cluttered. I mean, there's so many things that you can see.
But it's meant to see it.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's better to have you know everything that you can have first and then choose which things you want to hide, rather than hiding a bunch of things and then you don't know that they're there.
Yeah, but if you have that really clear strategy at the beginning of, like, oh, this is the article, it's displayed in these ways, and it has this type of like alternative like override, then that is what really drives your configuration of the visibility. You have a question?
When you are using layout to override at the node, like individual node level, does that count as configuration, and does that cause the same issues as custom blocks when you
can you repeat that?
Yeah, so it actually, the layout goes into a field.
The question was, if you're using Layout Builder and override the node, does it make you export your configuration, like if you would place a custom block on a page, like with a block reference?
Yeah, you get that same error where, like, hey, I have the configuration, but now I don't have the content.
Right.
Yeah, it's the decoupling of content and configuration.
Yeah, and so what happens when you create a layout for a node is that it goes into a field called field layout, and so it's content, and it's treated as content. If you have placed a block, though, that is since the blocks that you place that are done with the create custom block are non-reusable blocks, they would need to exist in the content there, but they don't have configuration associated with them in the same way that like a reusable block does. Yeah.
So this is when I said like the blocks are different from the core. They're the same, but with a different kind of supporting structure. That stuff is gone. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And yeah.
I'm going to circle back.
Yes, the question that we kind of didn't finish.
Placing it on a patterned set of pages.
Yeah. Yeah, and so so I think the thing that maybe we needed to circle back to on your question was that there you can do the default layout, and so you can say for every type of content. So I'm on the article content type. If I hit manage layout here, this is what gets applied globally to every single one, and it uses like Devel under the hood to generate all this stuff. I think because we get all these same sample images like you get with Devel, so it does make looking at things kind of crummy. But if we toggle this image preview thing, we can get an easier to control version of this. So did that answer kind of your first question? And then was the second question a different question?
Well, it's patterning. Let's say I have a content type, and I want to place a block just on the German version of it, or a subset, not necessarily language, but a subset of that I can define.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I actually don't know about the global default layout builder configuration, whether that has a translation option.
No, it's not. Here, I'll get this.
Yeah.
We're okay. I understand what he asked. Okay, so if I ask it a different way, like the current block system, I can target visibility based on a regex for a certain section of pages. Can I do that in Layout Builder?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes, kind of. It takes work. Okay. And that's the answer. And we're done because the next.
Yeah. We don't want to keep people held up.
Yeah.
Right now.
We can buff it. We can go downstairs. My son's here, so
you want to keep buff? Let's go buff this in there.